Who has had an experience getting into leadership, being in leadership, maybe with leadership, that something happens and you think to yourself, what are we doing? Or did that really happen? Everybody has a bad day. So to continue on this season with leadership hacks, today we're going to talk about leadership fails. And it wouldn't be a Leaders Leading Leaders podcast if I didn't share some personal experiences and talk about how you can avoid those leadership fails. Stick with us. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. I am your host, John Espinosa. Welcome everybody to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Hey everyone, John here. Welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. I'm excited to be here with you today. Thank you for listening in. For any new listeners out there, welcome to the Go Be Great community. Thank you for spending your time. Thank you for clicking on the thumbnail. For those continued listeners out there, what can I say? I'm amazed. Thumbs up. Keep them coming in because I get all of that feedback and I make sure that we are providing relevant content that you can use that has a practical approach. So if you just take one takeaway and implement it, we've met our mission here of getting others to where they're going, and that starts with you. I've been in the leadership business for 15 plus years, developing training for leaders, walking right beside leaders, mentoring and coaching leaders, and making sure that leaders are set up for success day one. So that's why whenever this season came about and we talked about some possibilities for themes, leadership hacks was at the top of the list. And for me, I took the approach and I asked myself the question, and you, the listeners, the question, what would you have liked to know on day one of beginning your leadership role? And a lot of answers came in. Well, one of the things that came in were, John, you're always talking about successes. What about those failures? Well, today we're going to discuss leadership fails. And it would not be a Leaders Leading Leaders podcast if I didn't give you some ways to avoid those fails. So that's what today's episode is going to be about. Many times you'll hear people leave the organization not because of the work that they're doing, but because of the leader that's leading. So stick with us till the very end of this list. So let's kick this thing off. The very first one at the top. And I put this at the top because for me, it is something that I feel is an important trait. It is the leader's job to create vision. So lack of vision, first leadership fail. Failing to provide a lack of vision as a leader is like following somebody that doesn't know where they're going. So how do we avoid this? We as leaders have to create a clear vision. And for me, I don't care if your team is 1 or if it's 400 that you're leading. You have to have a clear vision in your mind so you can articulate that vision everybody else. So that way they have a clear path, a clear direction, and we know when we're not moving in that direction and we know when we are moving in that direction. Two different feelings there, I can promise you. And if you don't have a vision, this is what it feels like you're going around the circle. I call it circling the drain because eventually, guess what? You're going to go down into the drain. And then you're going to be left with lack of motivation, people leaving the organization, all the things that we don't want in leadership. So create clarity in your vision as a leader. Number 2, poor communication. I don't know how many times that I've walked into organizations and worked with senior leadership, worked with middle leadership, middle management, worked with the front lines, all the way down into the workforce. Communication comes up. When I do SWOT analysis, it comes up as an opportunity and it comes up as a weakness, internal and external to the organization. Well, guess what? 99% of the time, what do we want to do when we hear we have poor communication? Let's communicate more. That's not the answer. In my experience, it's not the quantity of communication that you're putting out, it's the quality of communication that you're putting out. So to combat poor communication, create a communication strategy plan. Create that plan. How are you currently communicating? Where are people getting their information? Push-pull method. So you're pushing out information and then you're posting information and people are going and receiving that information. Are they working? With business analytics, analytics, you can tell if people are visiting websites, if you hear people talking about communication that's coming out. A lot of times, they're not aware that the information within those communications are important to their day-to-day. So create the why and make sure that it's not quantity of the communication, but it's the quality of communication. Third one, micromanagement. Who has experienced micromanagement? I think we've all been there and done that, where you feel like the manager, the leader is constantly has their thumb on you. They're asking for daily reports. They're double checking your work. So how do we prevent micromanagement? Trust and empower. We have to trust our team to do the right thing. And then we have to empower them to make a decision. Because if you're micromanaging, there is lack of innovation, there is lack of accountability. Micromanagement tends to create a lot of the fails that we're going to talk on the list. So if you notice the tendency that you are a micromanager, or you're receiving feedback that you're a micromanager, take a hard look at yourself. Do you trust your employees? And how are you empowering them to make decisions? Let's talk about the fourth leadership fail. Avoiding conflict. How many people know that there's something going on within the organization, whether it's between two individuals, or maybe it's a leader, or maybe it's just the organization itself, or maybe someone has came to you in confidence and voiced a concern, and guess what? You bury your head in the sand. You don't do anything about it. So from an employee standpoint, if I come to you and I bring you a situation and nothing gets done, trust goes down. So what's the plan for not avoiding conflict? We have to focus on the facts. We have to ask good questions and be curious. Get to the root of the problem. What is really going on? And then guess what? We're going to have those hard conversations. And you can plan out those conversations. There's a way. Close the gap. Go back. We've talked about that on a podcast. Just search for Closing the Gap. Having those crucial conversations. It's going to be a great way for you to start planning those difficult conversations so you as a leader won't be avoiding conflict. Let's talk about not listening to feedback. The fifth one that we have on our list. There is something about feedback that can be a gift and it can also be a curse. Just the word feedback puts people on the defensive. So be careful how you use feedback, but also let the person know who's giving you that feedback how you like to receive that feedback. Not listening to feedback means that you're letting your ego get in the way. And when you let your ego get in the way, that shuts out everything else. So instead of being open-minded, we're closed-minded. Instead of being curious, we're directive. Everything we try to avoid, that ego pushes it all out. So don't let your ego get away and make sure that you're open and receptive to feedback. Accountability. And the leadership fail is lack of accountability here. So we have accountability to ourselves and we have accountability to others. And the main thing that I have here on my list is establishing expectations. The way that we can prevent a lack of accountability is make sure that people are clear around the expectations. I always like to finish conversations when we get out of a tasking meeting or when somebody identifies a challenge or they're trying to close a gap. A great question to end that: how are you going to hold yourself accountable? Don't put the accountability on yourself. Don't ask, how am I, or how do you want me to hold you accountable? Because then guess what? You're just creating that out for that individual. So instead, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? And then pause and listen, and you would be surprised. Now, when it comes to your accountability, holding yourself accountable, you have to show up. You have to show up every single day and be consistent. Say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say. I can't say it any simpler than that. Great way to avoid lack of accountability for yourself and others. Set those expectations and show up for your team. Let's talk about failure to adapt. So, failure to adapt, and this has to do with change management. I don't know anybody out there that likes change. Every organization that I've been in, even some of the most innovative organizations that I've had the pleasure to work with, change is still an issue. Change management, the fear of change. It's human nature to hold on to something that's comfortable And change is uncomfortable. When we get outside of that comfort zone, when we start becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable, that's when you see that pendulum shift from failure to adapt to innovation. So one of the things I have here on my list to avoid that, learn to fail fast. Most organizations will fail more than they succeed. And that's for a reason. If you are failing, you are innovating. Not every good innovative idea is going to work. However, it may get you another step to where you are going. So learning to fail fast is a way to make sure that you're not failing to adapt within the organization. Ineffective delegation. Again, I got a great podcast. We actually talk about it in this season, the triple Ds. So how do you get things done? You either delegate, you do it yourself, or you delay. As a leader, you don't have enough time in your day to do everything. You have to learn how to create capacity through your team to get those things done. The only way as leaders that we can create more time is to spread it across our teams. So make sure that you're creating capacity in your team and you're delegating work. Don't do it all yourself and don't delay it unless it's just a low priority and it can be delayed. Here's a tough one for me. One of the things that I've seen great organizations fail at, and it can happen really quick, favoritism. Favoritism is a leadership fail that you can go from 60 to 0 in a blink of an eye. If you as a leader are perceived showing favoritism to an individual or to a group of individuals, it will not take long for others to start pulling away from the collective team and to create a lot of dissension within your team. So how do we combat that? You got to have some self-awareness about this. You as a leader, we can't go back to the individual contributor role that we came from, especially if you are leading a team that you may be a part of at one time. Those relationships have to change. The way that you interact with people, maybe you went out after hours to have some cocktails or drinks or food. You can't do that anymore. So that self-awareness is going to be a big piece on how to prevent favoritism within the group, from you, and all around. And then last but not least, and this is the one I told you that you really needed to wait for, because for this one, neglecting team development, I've left organizations because they neglect to develop their people, they neglected to develop myself, and they neglected to develop themselves as a leader. I want to be part of a learning culture, and learning cultures create growth, and growth is the opposite of neglecting team development. So that's what I have on the list. Make sure that you are creating the culture that you want to be working for. So you need to externalize yourself a little bit here and ask yourself, what attracted you to go work for an organization? There was an organization that I worked at, and we always joked that it was the best first job and the best third job that you would ever have. Why? Because the organization did a great job of developing their employees so well that other organizations would come in and poach them and take them away. But then guess what? They go work for those other organizations and realize the grass wasn't necessarily greener on the other side. So we would welcome them back with open arms, because a lot of times they brought back that growth with them into the organization. And when they came back, they were unstoppable. Their motivation was there. They realized just how well the organization was run and how important that professional development, that team development was to their career potential, to their growth, personally and professionally. So that last one, make sure that you have a way to instill team development every year, all the time. It's a priority. I'm from the training field. My background is in training. We develop training all the time. And guess what's neglected within our groups? Training. So the first thing every year, budget allocation, guess what? Team development. We have to find ways to develop our team, and we can't be afraid that we're going to develop them so well, they're going to find other places to go because people are going to want them. But that's something that we owe others. We owe them the potential. We owe them the opportunity to make sure that they are growing, because when they are growing, we are growing as a team. So these leadership fails that we just talked about and the ways to prevent them are going to be important for whether you're a new leader coming into an organization, whether you're thinking about getting into leadership, or maybe you're a seasoned leader and you've gotten comfortable yourself. I've caught myself getting too comfortable, and I always look for ways to challenge my thinking. I always ask for feedback. I try to make sure that I'm proactive in the innovation and the development of the team. And so far, it's helped. I'm not perfect and I'm still working on it. But if you can avoid these leadership fails, you're off to a great start on your leadership journey. I hope this helps somebody today. If you enjoy what you heard, give me a thumbs up. Let me know. Do you like this? This is a little different than what I normally do. Lists and then ways that you can prevent those things. So let me know what you think. Put a comment below. Make sure that you're subscribing to the channel because you're not going to want to miss any of the episodes on this season, because I wish I knew some of these walking in the door day one. And when you pour into yourself, that's when we can truly pour into others and help them get to where they're going. Go be great. Talk to everyone later. Bye. If you like what you're hearing, do us a favor. Click on that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up or leave a comment. That lets us know that what we are putting out benefits you. If you want additional information or resources or learn how to work with me, head on over to thejohnespinosa.com, because when we become better versions of ourselves, it helps us get others to where they're going. Go be great. Talk to everyone later.